Hello, and welcome to the Objective Health Show. I am your host today, Erica, and joining me in the virtual studio is Doug, Elliot, James, and behind the wheels of steel, Damien. So, welcome all.
Hi, everybody.
Glad we can meet here again in this virtual studio. So, today we're going to talk about some stuff from way back, but that may have some current implications. And this is the world of synthetic biology, or Syn-bio. So in the past, we've done a show similar for those that are listening now. If you'd like to go back and check out our show, Objective Health number 30, Gene Tech, What the Heck? That was 2019. And now we're in 2021. And I was just looking around at this, being in the organic farming world. I always kind of come back and check in on where things are going. And for those who may not be informed in this area, the whole GMO thing has kind of like disappeared, gone unregulated or untalked about since the California potential proposal of labeling, and that never really happened. And then we kind of just saw all this stuff kind of go under the radar. So on this show, sometimes other than talking about COVID, we look back at things that may pique interest. And so for those that are unfamiliar with what synthetic biology is, it's a pretty powerful technology. Some refer to it as GMO 2.0 or genetic modification on steroids. There's really like no agreed upon definition. It kind of encompasses all this new extreme engineering, what I like to call, and Catherine Austin Fitts calls it, creepy tech. And so basically, we kind of saw GMOs go into the area of gene drives, and we've seen this in the last couple of years with like a genetically modified mosquito to fight malaria. And so I just think it's interesting to kind of come back to it because when doing research for this show, I couldn't really find anything current. So a lot of the articles that we're going to reference today are actually from as far back as 2007. And so this is just when this type of tech was being invested in and people were going wild about the potentials. And what brought it on my radar is that just this year, 2 women received the Nobel Peace Prize in chemistry for CRISPR-9 technology. And CRISPR-9, I would say, falls into that Syn-bio area. And I found it very interesting. It was 2 women. But you didn't really see it get a lot of press. And, you would think 2 women win this, all of a sudden everyone should be covering it. Look at all these great things. And that is always a big red flag for me because there's something creepy going on here. What do you guys think? You think that it just disappeared? I know Doug and I were talking about it. You think they just up and decided, well, maybe tinkering with the genetic code of organisms and humans might not be such a good idea. What do you guys think?
I don't think that it's disappeared at all. In fact, I think that it's one of the reasons it's kind of flying under the radar is because it is so pervasive at this point, that it's almost like not, because it's not novel anymore, it's kind of just integrated into everything that we know. I mean, you look at all the fake foods that are coming out right now. I mean, that's essentially, like lab-grown meat, all this different kind of stuff, impossible foods. Like we were even talking before the show about the fact that a lot of even the supplements that are in the market are actually examples of some of this synthetic biology where they've tweaked, yeast or other kind of microorganisms to produce substances. And some of these are just like food flavorings and things like that. I know orange flavoring, grapefruit flavoring, vanilla. They found ways to get bacteria to produce these fake substances that have these flavors. But yeah, I mean there was a huge scandal back I think in the 90s where they were producing what was it, tryptophan via these yeast cells, I believe. And there was a big scandal because there was a contaminated batch that ended up making people sick, might have even killed some people. And yeah, so I mean, it's just it's so integrated now. It basically is everywhere. So you don't really see articles about synthetic biology because it's just kind of like the way things are done now. It's everywhere.
It sounds like the difference between genetically modified or genetic engineering and synthetic biology, the way I understand it, is that genetic engineering is taking an existing species like corn, for instance, and splicing genes in from a different organism,
Hmm.
like a bacteria to produce a pesticide that kills pests that would eat it, or splicing in a gene that makes it resistant to an herbicide, so that you can spray the field down with herbicides, and the weeds will die, but the crops won't die. So synthetic biology, and correct me if I'm wrong, is basically mixing and matching and creating entirely new organism, like a new species of yeast that or a new species of bacteria. In the example of the yeast, a new species of yeast that produces, the molecule that creates the flavor of vanilla. So I could see from the corporate world how this would be seen as just a boon, because instead of having to, grow vanilla beans and extract the vanilla and, deal with all of those pesky farmers who want to be paid for their work, they can grow huge vats of this Frankenstein yeast that's created in a lab, just feed it sugar. It produces the vanilla flavoring. They can skim it off and bottle it up and send it out to consumers or put it into baked goods. And it's, as far as I can tell, it's being marketed as a natural product or a sustainable food product because it's produced by a living organism. So therefore, it's they're marketing it as something natural, which I think anybody. It seems like a stretch to call that natural. I don't know
Hmm.
what you guys think, but
Most definitely.
Yeah.
Those that may not know too, you can actually look on your products because it's actually called vanillin, LIN, instead of vanilla. So if you at least know what you're looking for, you can see it. And I agree with you, James, very much so. In one of our articles, Synthetic Biology, the Next Generation of Genetic Engineering, and this was in 2013, they talked about how the Syn-bio market was estimated to be worth about $10.8 billion by 2016. And between 2005 and 2010, the US government alone invested $430 million on biology related research. And getting to what you were saying, James, they spent $0 on environmental risk assessment. So, what creating these kind of Frankenstein organisms, like what is the risk on the environment and people, for sure, because like GMOs that came out in the 90s, we still don't, we're about 30 years in. And, speaking of the Roundup Ready corn and stuff, they, found that it could produce those pesticides in your gut. And so we don't really know because there's no, at least in the US, there's no regulation. There's no precautionary principle applied. It's just mad science, run amok with a lot of money.
Yeah. It's kind of crazy too. It makes me think of that writer from the Guardian, George Monbiot, was quoted recently. Well, not that recently at this point now. It was probably within the last couple of years. How he thinks that farming is essentially going to be a thing of the past. That basically all of our food is going to be grown in vats, grown in labs, all these kinds of things. And he's talking about it enthusiastically. He's talking about how great it's going to be that, we don't have to worry about, rely on this dirty farming practice anymore. We're going to have these, factories essentially pumping out our proteins and all these sorts of things, lab grown meat, all these different, you know, it's really like something out of like the Jetsons or something like that. We're all going to have these like food pills that replace all our, you know, dirty things like having to eat. I don't know. It's a very kind of dystopian future that in my eyes anyway, it really seems like, you know, you were talking before the show, Eric, about transhumanism, and I really think it does kind of, you know, go along those sorts of lines. Yeah, anyway, I find it disturbing. That's basically, I guess, my point.
Well, understandably, Doug, and like many things, like many of these new innovative solutions, what they do is the way that they market it and the way that they get it accepted by the public is by capitalizing on their fears and appealing to their emotions, right? And that can be whether that is the climate fascism, whether that is the coronavirus nonsense, you know, the lockdowns, the mask wearing, the stripping away people's rights. But even when it comes to things like synthetic biology, what they're doing is they're capitalizing on this fear that people have that we're dwindling the Earth's resources and that we're contributing to global warming and all of this kind of stuff. And that actually, you know, if only we had more of this technology, then there would be no more human suffering. We want to get rid of human suffering and we want to feed the planet, right? As if they couldn't do that already. I mean, anyone with two firing neurons could see that, you know, that would not be a hard thing to do if things are a little bit more equal, let's say. But ultimately, that's they do this with the promise of those kind of lofty goals, right? And that's what's going to get people on board. But ultimately, like there are, I mean, what potential risks could there be for synthesizing a new organism, right? It's like, you know, we're talking about kind of this show. We talk about the potential detrimental health effects of, you know, all of these well-known man-made chemicals. You know, you've got BPA, you've got phthalates, you've got plastics, you've got all of these other kind of toxic things. And then what could potentially be, you know, go wrong when you are synthesizing an organism? You're taking some genetic material from one thing and another genetic material from another thing, and you're not only kind of engineering something that already exists, but you're creating something fundamentally new, novel, right? And you think like you introduce that into the environment, like these genetically engineered mosquitoes, but now they're talking about engineering nanobots, like creating new species, new organisms. And what's going to happen to the local environment when that gets out and starts maybe proliferating and then affecting the ecosystem as a whole? I mean, it's kind of like the stuff out of that you see in Hollywood movies, you know, like the dystopian end of the world movies. It's like when it's when arrogant scientists try to play God that the big mistakes happen. Like it brings to mind the theory 28 Days Later. I don't know if you guys have seen that, but it's a zombie apocalypse kind of movie, and it comes about when they're genetically engineering a rage virus and they infect monkeys with it, and the monkeys get out and they end up killing everyone, or the monkeys infect other people and then the people turn into zombies and end up killing everyone else. And that is the end of the world scenario. And it just makes you wonder whether if they continue playing around with this synthetic biology, synthesizing new biological organisms, trying to play God, you know, if this is you know, potentially going to be humanity's downfall at some point. I think it's entirely possible. I wish they'd just stop it, personally. I wish they would just put a stop to it. Fix the problems that we already have. Don't make new problems.
Yeah.
Because that appears what this has the potential to do anyway. That's just my opinion on it.
Yeah.
No, I agree. I think that maybe that movie was a little bit of predictive programming, right? Well, and addressing what you were saying, Elliot, the woman I was talking about that won the Nobel Peace Prize for this is the Jennifer Doudna, and she actually came out and said, you know, a few years ago about how I guess I worry about a couple of things. I think there's a sort of potential for unintended consequences of gene editing in people for clinical use. How would you ever do the kinds of experiments that you want to do to ensure safety? And then there's another application of gene editing called gene drives that involves moving genetic traits very quickly through the population And there's been discussion about this in the media around the use of gene drives for insects like mosquitoes to control disease. On the one hand, that sounds like a desirable thing. On the other hand, I think once again, one has to think about the potential for unintended consequences of releasing a system like that into an environmental setting where you can't predict what might happen.
Yeah.
So she was the creator of this, and she's in numerous articles about CRISPR-9 saying that, yeah, well, it's interesting, but I don't know if it's safe. You know what I mean? And they already did let those mosquitoes out, so
yeah,
we'll see.
I mean, one thing that they seem to be really bad at is actually foreseeing the potential negative consequences for their actions. You know, they seem to be really kind of short-sighted. You know, their eye is on the goal and they see nothing else. And it's unfortunate because, you know, once these things are out of the lab, there really is no turning back. You can't go up and collect all of the genetically modified organisms that have been released since their invention. You know, go, oh, you know what? This is causing a big problem. It's actually causing mutations, and all the non-genetically modified stuff is picking up the genetic material from the genetically modified stuff, and this is actually really bad. So let's go and collect it and do a do-over. It's like, no, you can't do that. Once it's out there, it's out there. You can't go back. And it seems really unfortunate that either they are ignoring the potential consequences, or through their hubris they just don't see it. It's like they can't see any negative consequences of this. It's almost like it is kind of like a God sort of delusion
Complex.
Yeah, it's kind of like it's almost like this idea that this is human destiny, right? Like that's our function on the planet, is to create all these wonderful technologies, and that we're going to save everything through our magnificent brains that come up with all these wonderful technological solutions to all our problems. And it's like it's a form of blindness. It's just not being able to see the potential, and even likely in some cases negative consequences.
Yeah, I think we've seen some of that with GMO corn, actually, because and Erica, you probably know more than I do about this, but you know, the spread of the GMO corn genes into non-GMO corn has actually allowed Monsanto to go in and test farmers' fields and say, oh, well, you know, our corn genes are in your corn and it's patented and you can't grow it, and we're suing you because you know, look, we have evidence that you're stealing our corn technology, when it's really, you know, corn pollen spreads quite widely, and it's naturally spreading into farmers' fields, and basically infecting the non-GMO corn genetics with the GMO corn genes from Monsanto's Frankenfoods. And not only that, but they've also bred a lot of the GMO crops so that the seeds of the first or second generation of the crop are non-viable. So the farmers can't save their own seed. They can't replant them because they won't grow. So what this means is that the farmers are then locked into buying their seed from Monsanto or whoever the GMO seed producing company is. So, you know, it gives them greater and greater control over their market. You know, I'm sure that's the kind of like cold, lifeless language that they use, not thinking about the fact that this could be incredibly dangerous, you know, for the global population.
Yeah, Terminator tech is what
Terminator tech, right?
Yeah.
Terminator. That doesn't sound ominous at all.
But you know, I'm gonna put on the tinfoil hat here, and you know, maybe that was the intention with GMOs, the first generation, and I've been saying this for 20 years, like contamination, mass contamination, like we just contaminate the entire food supply. And then along come these synthetic bio companies that now, like Impossible Foods, or what's the other one?
Beyond.
I can't remember the Memphis Meats.
Oh, Memphis
you know,
Meats,
so
yeah.
we're we're going to, don't be problematic with the corn and it's all contaminated, because we're just going to create all new food for you.
So I
And
didn't know that those companies were synthetic bio companies. So not only GMO, I bet you that a lot of people who are thinking, oh, I'll eat these wonderful Impossible burgers because they're good for me, and I bet you that they don't know that those are GMO foods.
yeah, well, doing research for this show, as I said, it was hard to find anything from like 2018 currently about the science and where it's going. And even organizations like Food and Water Watch that usually kind of go to the meetings where they're passing these types of, regulations. So there was nothing, but I did go to the financial aspect, which showed that top funded synthetic biology startups, number 2 being Impossible Foods with over 500 million in funding. Right below that is Moderna. They say biotechnology, genetics, healthcare, medical, and pharmaceutical with 483 million. And then down the list, Memphis Meats, Food and Beverage Nutrition with 161 million. Now, that's not billions, but still, for like investors that want to make money, these are the kinds of things that people are investing in for, future payoffs. I don't know. It just is, it's pretty creepy. It's actually really creepy.
Well, in this article titled "Not Bot, Not Beast," scientists create first ever living programmable organism. Right, the one that was published on phys.org. Now, in that article, they talk about this Xenobot. So the Xenobot is a new life form, which is neither a living organism or no. It's not an animal, but it's also not a machine. So it's neither a traditional robot nor a known species of animal, but a new class of artifact, a living programmable organism. And so they talk about how they are less than 1 millimeters long and made up of 500 to 1,000 living cells. They have very simple shapes. Some have squat legs. They can propel themselves in linear and circular directions, joined together to act collectively and move small objects. Using their own cellular energy, they can live up to 10 days. And so they're talking about kind of what this could be used for. And they're talking that they may have great value. Xenobots may be able to clean our polluted oceans by collecting microplastics. Similarly, they may be used to enter confined or dangerous areas to scavenge toxins or radioactive material. And so the way that they're painting these kind of things, they paint them as though there is no risk, right? As though this is something that could be really helpful for humanity. It's like, how did we get so far up until this point without Xenobots? How did human beings evolve without Xenobots? In fact, I mean, you think what could potentially go wrong? You introduce a nanobot, like a Xenobot, into the ocean and just let it go. What's it going to do, right? What if it doesn't collect microplastics? What if it becomes incorporated into fish, right? What if it finds a way to, I don't know, to replicate? Or what if it becomes incorporated into other living organisms and then they replicate? Like, we don't know what this stuff actually does, right? When you're dealing with something so small and something kind of like seemingly somewhat intelligent, but in and of itself, then I mean, I think you could probably derail an entire ecosystem just by introducing something like that. I mean, thing is, if we think about even just taking one species from somewhere in the world and planting it into an ecosystem in another area of the world is enough to destroy that ecosystem, right? People who have taken, I don't know, like tropical predators, for instance, and they have, had those animals as pets, and the pets might be let out into the wild where they escape, and then they end up like reproducing or mating with other animals and destroying the entire kind of like the balance in that system. And these are animals that already like adapted to Earth. When we're dealing with things that are not adapted to Earth, that are like fundamentally novel, it just seems like such a risk. When is it really necessary? It's like this whole transhumanism agenda. These people who want to kind of like implant machines into our brains and connect us with AI. It's like why is this necessary, and who even wants this? I mean, I'm sure it's a very small minority of crazy deluded lunatics who are calling for this kind of stuff, because I would probably bet my money on the fact that 99% of people are not even all that interested. They don't care about this stuff. It's really the crazy few who are making the decisions, who are who shouldn't be left alone in a science laboratory, in my opinion. I'm sure.
Like
I
Elon
don't know. You
Musk.
don't want to get updates from your smart refrigerator pinging you directly into your brain, Elliot.
Yeah, I don't really care how many eggs I need to buy this week, right? I can work it out.
Well, I think it's anti-human. I really do. I think it's like we can create better. You know what I mean? It's like Darwinism on steroids. I don't know. It's just kooky. I do have one last article to share, just kind of going on what you were talking about, Elliot. So this was from the Daily Mail in 2011, and it's could hackers develop a computer virus to infect the human mind? And you're thinking, no, where's one on this? Well, they talk about synthetic biology, and they talk about the guy that created it, billionaire entrepreneur. I love that they're always entrepreneur billionaires. Oh, and philanthropists too. Craig Venter only created artificial life for the first time last year, so it's 2010, and he named it Cynthia with an S. This is one of the most powerful technologies in the world, synthetic biology, the writing of life. And he goes into how I advocate that cells are living computers and DNA is a programmable language. So just think about that for a moment. And he predicts a world where we can print DNA and even decode it. But he warned viruses and bacteria send chemicals into human brains and could be used to influence or even control their host. A literal virus injected into a host in the guise of a vaccine, say, could be used to control behavior. So I'll let y'all speculate on that. Daily Mail.
In a vaccine, you say?
Yes. Yeah. So, I don't want to sound like a kooky, crazy person, but these are just things that, I've been out, we know that Bill and Melinda Gates looked into it years and invested millions in it too. So these are just potential scenarios to contemplate. I do not think it's going to save the planet. I really think it's moved beyond food and farming into the realm of what Elliot was sharing, like just leaving these guys alone in a room to create their own children / artificial life is frightening.
Yeah. You know what? I think that it's kind of like, it seems as though for these guys there is no natural order of things. There's no higher power. I'd imagine that they're all diehard atheists, right?
Yeah.
They believe themselves to be gods, and in a way, I mean, if we look at kind of a more rounded view of kind of what Satanism might be, right? It's like these guys, there is no God above them, there is no higher power, there is no higher intelligence. They seek to be that, right? And so it's like a sheer, it's like not a disregard, but it's like a defiance of creation, right? That's what it kind of seems like it is. It's like putting your fingers up to creation and saying, I can do better than you. Right. And in fact, I'm going to do better than you. And if it means destroying everything, well, I don't care. Because, that it's almost like a power thing that these guys have going on with them. That's what it seems like. And I don't think that it's going to spell good things if it carries on the way that it is. Whether it will get to the point where they do destroy the Earth, or whether the Earth will destroy itself before then, who knows? But ultimately, it's a very dangerous set of cards that these guys are playing with, I think.
Psychopathic.
Agreed.
Yeah.
When it comes to food, Erica, do you know if the organic food label is still something that people could count on to exclude GMO organisms? It's supposed to, right? So
yeah.
theoretically, or something that's labeled organic, unless it's obviously there's an issue with contamination potentially, but at least they wouldn't be knowingly using GMO or Syn-bio.
I'm not 100% sure. I'd have to go back and look, but I'm from following the organic standards and how they're constantly being tweaked and changed. And especially with synthetic biology, I think that they're included because they're not, because they're labeled general, or they're categorized as generally regarded as safe. That grass sorry, I can't talk. And I know that like Organic Consumers Association, these kinds of nonprofits have been trying to really spread the word about this. But as we can see, it's really kind of, especially now with COVID and everything, like all of these little grassroots organizations have pretty much just had their legs chopped off. They don't, you know what I mean? They're not really being heard. It's not really concern, I'd say like with the synthetic biology, really the only way you can tell, but like with the vanilla, is that it calls it vanillin, you know what I mean? But you wouldn't know that unless you went down this quite scary rabbit hole of these types of things. And as Doug was saying in the beginning, I know orange juice, grapefruit juice. So it's hard to say. I do think that the organic industry is compromised. But I don't know. I think you're better off just squeezing your own oranges if you got them. And I don't know. It's not looking good. I'll put it that way. And especially with these big biotech companies that have so much money and so much control, like Moderna being one of them, it's like David and Goliath as far as the battle is concerned. It's the little guys like, hey, watch out, be careful, inform yourself. So I don't know. But as always, I'm the optimist. So I think that we can arm ourselves with knowledge that we can, just watch very critically about all these articles that we all read every day anyway. And these little things, I'm thinking about the Moderna stuff, like, well, this is their background. They obviously support CRISPR-9 technology. So what does that mean? And it's not like they're all proprietary secrets, right? So it's not like they're going to come right out and say, by the way, we've been tweaking DNA strands and, they're not going to be forthcoming, I think. But you guys got anything else? Any other strategies for not becoming a little nanobot?
Right.
Well, I like to think that as, I guess our bodies are capable of healing. We're self-correcting organisms. And, going back to what y'all have been saying about the hubris and God complexes that some of these guys have, and, tinkering with things that they don't really understand. The optimist part of me wants to believe that we're a lot stronger and more resilient than we're led to believe, So we've survived quite a bit of exposure to this sort of thing already, and maybe we're stronger than we think and stronger than they realize. Yeah.
Well said.
And I do really think knowledge is protection, just knowing, just being a critical consumer, and paying attention to all the little small things is very important. So,
yeah.
Well, if you all have nothing else to share, that's our show today. Thank you, co-hosts. Thank you, listeners. Please like and subscribe. We hope to come next week with another interesting topic. As of yet, we're not sure, but it seems daily the world changes and we got to try and keep up. So thank you for joining us, and hope you all have a wonderful day.
Bye, everybody.
Thanks.
Bye.
See you next time.